All right. Before we get the show on the road, definitely have to shout out our partner Steve. He's feeling a little under the weather, so he couldn't make it today, but it's all good. We're gonna hold it down for him right here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Feel better, Steve.
That's right. That's right. It's all good anyway, because this episode is about us. You know what I'm saying? This is a Black History Month episode. So I don't think he'll mind us, doing this one without him. So
Yeah, I'll shout out a few
um
for him.
yeah. We definitely, did discuss it with him for when he was gonna be on the show. So we can definitely represent his picks for sure. But yeah, man, Black History Month, it's a great time, I would say, to be a black professional wrestler right now.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
definitely. So, definitely want to take them through the history for sure. So let's we gotta shout out some of our pops favorites from his childhood. We gotta shout out Bobo Brazil. We gotta shout out, Abdullah the Butcher.
Yes, sir.
Those are guys from his era, Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas, those guys from that era. So we definitely want to shout out, the pioneers of it. And I know that there's some people missing from that era. Junkyard Dog, definitely want to shout him
Oh
out
yeah,
as
for sure.
well. Um, so definitely want to make sure that we show love to that era. Um, Unfortunately, that is before my time, so I don't know too much about it. I do know that Bobo Brazil had like more United States championships like than anybody, like across all the territories. He was like he was the belt collector for the US title,
Right
with
before they
all
merged
the
them all together.
yep.
Yep.
Yep. So, he was definitely making history. Um but yeah, starting from where I'm familiar, with wrestling, the first black wrestler I really remember seeing actually was Kamala. When
Mm.
he was beating with the Undertaker, that was really the only. He was. It seemed like he was the him and Coco Beware. I think they were maybe the only two that were in WWF at that time that were black wrestlers. Um, but then shortly after that came Ahmed Johnson. I know a lot of
Right.
people like to shit on him. That's fun to do on the internet. But when I was a kid, Ahmed Johnson was the shit. Um, he was, man. Like
Yeah.
he was dope because he was like one of the first representations of hip hop in wrestling that I remember. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
also want to shout out Ron Simmons because he became the first recognized black world champion in professional wrestling when he beat Vader for the WCW title in 91, I think that was.
Yeah.
Um so, but then, him and Ahmed Johnson, they had that classic rivalry in WWF when he came in as Farouk, and they were beefing like for that whole time. Like they were just like forever enemies. Um,
Yeah.
but then
Ron
around that,
Simmons for me, like he's probably the first black wrestler I remember seeing for sure. And not when he was Ron Simmons in WCW, but when he
right.
was Farouk in WWF. So yeah.
Yep. Yep.
hmm But
Um,
and that was basically right. It was a little bit before Nation and Domination, but like it
yeah.
was starting. It was like right around that time that it was like he was starting to form that stable.
Yeah. And and also I don't want to jump too far ahead, but before them we had Men on a Mission, Mo and Mabel and their manager Oscar. Um, which is also cool because Mo, Oscar, Mabel, men on a mission. So,
hmm
um,
Yep. Nice little play on
so
words.
yeah, exactly. But they were the first guys that I remember ever coming to the ring rapping.
Yeah.
Because Oscar used to do their raps, and they would cut like WrestleMania promos and stuff like that, doing raps. So that was like the first obvious infusion, I would say, of like hip hop culture and pro wrestling. And then, like I said, Ahmed, he just kind of represented that. But then go into the nation, Eric, talk about it.
Well, I mean, I would say the Nation they didn't really have that like hip hop influence like too much to what they were doing. They were more so on that like militant type wave or like swagger,
Mm-hmm.
demeanor, like how they carried themselves. That's how they carried themselves. So, obviously you had Farouk, you had Ahmed Johnson at one point, you had The Rock. He came into the mix later. You had D'Lo Brown. Who am I? Am I leaving out anybody that was in
The
that like
Godfather,
early? Oh yeah, Godfather. Yep, Godfather. So yeah,
Mark
you had
Henry.
all these different black wrestlers from different backgrounds that at a time. I think black wrestlers, especially in WWF, at the time before it was WWE, I think they had a little bit of a harder road to climb up because at that time there were no black WWF champions, and that was one thing that I remember Farouk saying badly that he wanted around the time that he was getting it going. So I think that it was harder for them because they kind of had to stand out during a time when it was like everybody else was being pushed to the forefront, but because of who they were and how much they actually stood out
Hmm.
amongst every other character, I think it just worked. And they were badasses too. Like if you saw Farouk, like you would immediately not want to mess with that dude, like
Yeah,
straight up.
and they say, like they said that he was really like that, like in the locker
Right.
room too, like he was a shooter. So it was like if if you had to really know how to fight if you really wanted to, you know what I mean? Like he was really putting it down in the locker room.
Right.
I want to bring this picture up one more time just because it'll be a little bit easier for us to go through the timeline, I think. So we mentioned the Nation. You have Farouk and D'Lo Brown, one of the most influential wrestlers ever, and Steve brought up a good point when we were talking about this the other day, but you see a lot of D'Lo Brown and Angelo Dawkins, and I totally agree with that.
100%.
Over here to the right, we have Bad News Brown. He was definitely legendary for his time in the 80s, for sure, with WWE. He had that legendary feud with Roddy Piper. Next to him, to the left, we have Zeus, aka Debo from Friday. We
Shout
have
out
to
to
remember
Zeus.
exactly. He had classic WrestleMania moments with Hulk Hogan. Um, if you go all the way to the top behind Big E, you have Papa Shango, aka the Godfather. So he's actually on here twice because he's over there to the left too, next to
Right.
Kamala. Um, so yeah, that's a good representation of the old school right there, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. And that phase of the Rock between the Nation and before Hollywood Rock for sure, but there was like a
Yeah.
period. There was, I would say, like 98 to like maybe 2000.
Yep.
That period where he was the Nation Rock, and then he was just like the People's Champ Rock, and $500 Shades Rock. That was to me when his character was the blackest, if that makes sense.
I agree, and that's when other black wrestlers started to kind of get the door open for him. So then you have the Nation kind of splits from that point. So then you have D'Lo going on to be his own solo thing, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have Mark Henry kind of come up around this time, and him and Mark Henry start working together a lot. Then Farouk goes and forms his own tag team with Bradshaw. So then he like has his own thing going on. Then
Mm-hmm.
obviously The Rock gets catapulted to be one of the biggest stars around that time. So he obviously shot up to the moon. And then even The Godfather, like The Godfather ended up being his own thing and having his own thing even before he got pulled into another stable. So like everybody went off to do their own thing, and then you have other guys that are coming up around this time. Like you got Devon Dudley, who's with the Dudley Boys.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this era of new black wrestlers starting to crop up a little bit. You got
Well, before we get there, we got to go over to WCW because we've only spoken
I
about
was gonna go there.
WWE.
I was gonna
Okay,
go there
okay,
because
for
then
sure.
I was gonna say then you have Booker T from WCW, um, and even like before, obviously before he gets to the WWE at that time, Booker T and his brother Stevie Ray, Harlem Heat. To
Mm-hmm.
me, one of the first real black tag teams that like got over for just being cool and for being really good workers too. That was the other thing. Like they both could really work. Um, you put them up against any of like those high caliber tag teams around that time, like the Steiner brothers, like they could go with them. So
Yeah.
I think they definitely had the chance to pull that off before anybody else really was established as like a credible black tag team around that time.
Yeah. And again, they kind of had the same thing that Ahmed Johnson was doing on the WWE side, where it's like they brought, and it was a little more overt with them.
Yeah.
But they were clearly bringing in hip hop culture into pro wrestling. Their music, Booker T kept the same music literally his entire career. It's still his music to this day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's such a hip hop ass beat. Like,
Right.
you know, the way Booker T talks, you know what I mean? Like, it's very, very heavily street influenced, you know what I mean? And it's like that's what hip hop represents. So so definitely that. Then you had, you know, Norman Smiley around this time. You know, he was doing his thing. He was more on the silly side, obviously, but he's we still talk about him to this day. He's still known, you know, he's remembered, and he's one of the coaches for NXT now. So obviously he has a really good mind for the business, because why hire him out of all the other people that worked at WCW? You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that got over by just his character alone. Like, was he a good worker? Yes, it was, and very underratedly so, I might add. But he didn't. It wasn't necessarily the most important thing that got him over. Like, what got him over was the silly shit. And that is why it's still remembered to this day, because nobody else was pulling that off before he did.
100%. 100%. And then also on the lady side of things in WCW, you had Jacqueline. You know, she was doing things with Kevin Sullivan, and she was booked to have a match against Disco Inferno, I want to say, but Disco didn't want to lose to a woman. So, you know, there ended up being some, you know, behind the scenes issues or whatever. But then she ended up going to WWE, joining up with Mark Merrow, and had one of the most memorable programs, you know, of the Attitude Era, her and Sable. You know, and it's not even like, obviously Sable's not a good wrestler, but that program is memorable. And it helped get Jackie over, you know, and then she goes on to, you know, do PMS with Terry Runnels. And, you know, I want to say she was one of the few women who held the light heavyweight championship or the cruiserweight championship, one of those two. I think it might have been
WCW when it was still there, or in WWE.
I think in WWE.
Oh, okay.
I think in WWE. So yeah, shout out to Jacqueline as well. And then, you know, also around that time, coming up around the same time as her, you had Jazz. You know, she was on the ECW side. I don't know if they ever had a match together. That's a match that I really wish I could have saw. I know Jacqueline refereed one of Jazz's matches one time, but I don't know if they ever had a one-on-one. But Jazz was way ahead of her time also.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Jazz came into a time when women's wrestling was nowhere near the forefront, and she was damn near outworking everybody around that time.
Facts.
Like, it was hard. She was outworking some of the guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's how good she was around that time. So, yeah, shout out to Jazz.
And she was believable. You know, she had a good character where it was like, it felt real. Like, nah, she really could kick your ass. Or a dude, like, she could whoop a dude's ass. Like, it really felt like that was legit, you know?
Yeah.
So around this time then, so now we're kind of getting into the early 2000s. So now we're looking at guys like Shelton Benjamin, you know, and Shelton Benjamin was one of the pioneers of the modern day style, I would say, and especially for black wrestlers, because, you know, it always felt like black wrestlers were sort of typecast to one type of wrestler. You know what I mean? They either had to be brawlers or like powerhouse type dudes, stuff like that. Like Booker T was kind of an exception, but he came from a tag team, so it's a little bit different. You know what I mean? Shelton was like one of the first ones who was wrestling like a Shawn Michaels or an RVD just as a solo act out the gate as a black man. So I loved seeing that.
Yeah, that was great around that time, because you're right. And I think it really helped that people like Shawn Michaels and people like Triple H really saw something in him early, and they had some of those banger matches, like on some of those like Raws where he was still pretty new to the system. It seemed like he caught on like that. Like, I still remember, like, we still talk about that one spot
The
between
super kick spot.
the super kick spot. And you know, as incredible as that was for Shawn to do, it takes two people to tango in that.
Yep.
And Shelton had to be a perfect in the right place at the right time for that. And you know, like I said, even against the match with Triple H, like he just showed that he belonged really, really early. Kind of along the same lanes of Booker T and Shelton, another guy I think who just got it right away around this time. And we'll talk about them later when we get into the era that's currently going on. But Bobby Lashley.
Well, yeah, because he started back, you know, around that time. I want to say he started in, I think 2005 in WWE, 2005, 2006, something like that. So yeah, around that time, you pretty much only had what, Viscera, you know, aka Mabel. We brought him up earlier. You had Viscera, you had The Rock floating in and out. But he was, you know, really starting to get into Hollywood by that time. And also, I just want to shout out The Rock because he is the first recognized Black WWE champion of all time. And his father was his father and Tony Atlas, so Rocky Johnson, are the first recognized Black champions, period, in WWE, and they were the tag team champions. So
nice
he's
to follow.
Yeah, especially, you know, and then so your dad was the first Black champion of any sort in the company, and then you go on to be the first top champion, you know, so that's dope.
Right.
But yeah, so you have Viscera, you kind of have The Rock floating in and out, you know, Mark Henry's around, Booker T's around. So those are really kind of your only guys at that point. Shelton's being built up, and then you get Bobby.
Right.
And Bobby is like, they're pushing him out the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, as they should.
That push was strong. I mean, he was wrestling John Cena pretty early on. I remember that. So yeah,
WrestleMania,
the Donald Trump situation at WrestleMania with him, Vince McMahon, Stone Cold, like that was a very high caliber situation to be put in. So yeah, I think they trusted him really early.
ECW champion.
Yep, exactly.
Pretty early on. Yeah, so and then he went on to have a really dope run in TNA after that too. A lot of people forget that part of his career, but like he was in TNA for some years before he came back to WWE.
Yep, because he did TNA, and before that he wanted to fight still. So that was when he did Bellator and started doing UFC again. I don't remember what accolades he got in there. I know he won a couple of championships over there as well. So yeah,
I don't know if he won any championships.
Really a time off period. Like
I don't know if he won any championships. I know that he has a winning record. I think he was like 8-1 or something like that professionally. Or 8-2 professionally, something like that. He has a really good record, and he fought like at all the leagues except UFC. He never went to the top. But Bellator is up there though. You know what I mean? Like if you're beating people down in Bellator, like that's usually the next step until you go to UFC. So he probably could have if he really wanted to.
Right.
But speaking of Bobby, you know, we got to bring up his man's MVP. MVP started bubbling around this time, you know. And I really like how they introduced him. He had a really unique debut because they were treating him almost like he was a basketball player. You know, MVP is, you know, they were treating him like he was a basketball player, like the hottest rookie, you know, like LeBron or I think it might have actually coincided like within a year or two of LeBron's draft. And I think they just mimicked a lot of that stuff to make it seem like, oh my God, this guy MVP, who's going to sign him? Where's he going to, you know what I mean? And they made him a big deal. And then his transition to the managerial stuff, you know, he's good at everything he does. He can rap, you know, he's got music out. We'll get into that in a little bit. You know, when we talk about the Ring and the Raps, when we bring up Griselda and, you know, all those guys, but that's dope. You know, he's just a talented guy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that he's one of the first guys I remember in that mid 2000s era making that US title really matter and mean something again, because it felt like for a while like they were kind of trying to experiment with what they wanted to do around that time period. But I think when you think about that belt and who was really carrying the torch with it, you got to bring up MVP around that time. 100%.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, I do want to backtrack a little bit before, because I'm going to try my best not to miss anybody.
Right.
But going back a little bit, we got to bring up, of course, K Quick, aka R-Truth.
Oh yeah.
And then we have to bring up, going slightly forward again, Monty Brown of TNA fame.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah, so I
now,
mean, R-Truth,
yeah, you're the TNA guy, so I'm gonna let you get
yeah.
into to Monty Brown a little bit here.
Yeah. So I mean, R-Truth and Monty Brown, they were kind of around TNA right around the same time. R-Truth was a little bit before him. He came up as Ron the Truth Killings. He was in a group with Road Dogg and Conan, I believe, called the Three Live Crew. And they a lot of the same things that you see R-Truth doing to this day, he was doing then. He rapped himself to the ring. Like he had the whole hip hop get up. Like that was really just who he was. But that one thing that was great about TNA is that they didn't really like if you already kind of had like a gimmick portrayed as like who you are in yourself, then they were kind of going to let you show that on screen. So
yeah,
he was able to showcase that. He was able to become, I think, the first world champ for TNA when they brought the NWA belt over there.
well, he was the first recognized Black NWA World Champion.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, first recognized Black NWA World Champion. I think, and then again, right after that time, you have Monty Brown who's coming up, and like I always say about Monty Brown, I think he just wasn't. He just came up in a time where I felt like if he had those same characteristics and everything that he was doing from TNA and WWE, he probably could have had a much higher ceiling. But what I will say about his TNA run that I think Monty excelled in is that he was one of those guys that wasn't really supposed to make it. Like he came in as a football player and just like one of those guys that just liked the wrestling lifestyle and wanted to see what it was like. But he wasn't really one of those guys that was supposed to like be at the top level competing for the title or anything like that. Like that wasn't really who he was brought in for. And then over just a period of time, you see this guy become from just a football player off from the NFL to a guy who is number one, 100% understands how funny his character is and how much he can get that off. Two, he figured out little ways to actually incorporate the football technicality into his matches. He had a finishing move called the pounce. And if you just look at any football game and if you look at anybody hit stick somebody real hard when they got to get that ball out, that's basically the same thing that Monty Brown was doing. But I think the thing that made it so unique with him was that, a lot of those guys, they come off the middle turnbuckle or they come off from the side and then just do like the shoulder tackle or whatever. But whenever you saw him do it, it looked just like how they did it in football. And I think before him, nobody was really bringing the hit stick movement into wrestling like that. So I just think Monty Brown was really unique, but he was maybe just a little bit before his time, before he was really able to pop off for real. But shout out to Monty Brown regardless.
Yeah, I think he was just a victim of a stacked roster happening all at the same time. Because like when he started getting hot, that was when they signed Christian. That's when they signed Kurt Angle. That's when they signed all these really big names. And there just almost wasn't really a spot for him. It's like, when would he have been the world champion? You know what I mean?
Right.
So he was just sort of almost a victim of circumstance in a way.
Yep.
But again, another guy who's remembered, he actually did have a slight run in ECW WWE as Marcus Corvon.
That's right.
But then I want to say he retired after that because if I'm not mistaken, he adopted his sister's kids because she was sick or something like that. And so he went to take care of them. And so, that's an honorable reason to leave the business if there is, so salute
100%.
Monty Brown for sure.
Definitely.
So now we're getting into like the early Kofi Kingston era.
Yep.
So Jamaican Kofi. He was doing his thing too, though. He's a multiple time intercontinental champion, tag champs with I want to say CM Punk, with R-Truth, with a couple of different teams, before the New Day linked up. But that's kind of the next thing is New Day.
Yeah. Yeah,
so then you get Austin Creed come, he becomes Xavier Woods. You got Big E Langston. He drops the Langston, becomes Big E, and they debut as sarcastic preachers.
Yeah. Sarcastic preachers that were very, very pretentious. They came out with the trombones. They
that was later.
Always said to the you said what?
I said that was later though. I'm talking about the preacher gimmick where they came out with like the white button ups and the
Yeah, well, they came out with the preacher. They were like like singing to the crowd and all this kind of stuff. But like around this time, the crowd wasn't really vibing with it, and they were just such good heels around this time that it's just one of those things that eventually over time it transitions into everyone just loving them after a while. And after a couple of years, they end up going on to become one of the most winningest tag teams in WWE period.
100%. Yeah, and
Kofi when they did goes on to have a WWE title run.
Yeah. I was gonna say when they did introduce, the more silly elements to the gimmick, the trombone and the bootios, and wearing the swim like inner tubes and stuff to the ring, and just being throwing pancakes to the crowd. Yeah, that definitely that was good for sure. Because it was super unique, and then also looking at them and then the contrast to one of the next big groups of black men who were doing their thing, which is the Hurt Business. It's such a dope contrast to look at that, because the Hurt Business, you have all these serious stoic men in suits who and then you have the New Day, who are like silly teenagers basically, who just want to have a good time and hang out with their friends, and and that's a good contrast to have. So I also want to get into some of the AEW crop, but we can go back a little bit also, because a lot of these guys came from TNA as well. Right. So, salute to these gentlemen up here and the ladies up here as well. But I definitely want you, Eric, to talk about Jay Lethal.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think Jay Lethal is probably one of the best indie wrestlers probably on the planet. And he probably has been for a really, really long time now. I think his early TNA run just solidifying the different types of characters that he could get into, whether it was the Black Machismo character acting like Randy Savage, whether it was him going back and forth with Ric Flair and basically getting his cadence and his sound like 100% to the T. Yeah, perfect. You have your feuds with AJ Styles around this time, because AJ Styles was attached with Ric Flair. So, you had a lot of really strong competitors going up against Jay Lethal, but he just always managed to find a way to stick out amongst the crowd. Bringing him back around the circle too with whatchamacallit, with Xavier Woods, but Austin Creed. This is right around the time that they started rocking with each other, and I think that connection also helped push Woods to where he was going eventually. But but yeah, I mean, you look at how far Jay Lethal's career has gone and look at where it is right now. Like, I think it's no secret that he is more than likely one of those AEW locker room leaders, because of the veteran time that he has put in, not only just in TNA, but we got to remember we can also look at his ROH career and look at it the exact same way. So I think he has a lot of time and equity with just a lot of the wrestlers that are in both brands, because he's been around so long. But that's why he's so respected, just because he's one of those dudes that just really gets it, and he's not afraid to share that knowledge with other people, it seems like.
100%. 100%. Well, actually, you know what? Let's bring this one back up just to make sure we didn't miss anybody. I don't think we did. I think we covered everybody on. Oh no! Shout out Bianca Belair.
Yep.
We got to shout out Naomi. We got to shout out Sasha Banks down here in the corner, Mercedes Monet, and then we got to shout out Ricochet standing over here in between the nation, and then up top on the left we have the Boogeyman.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Now we shouted everybody out. We're good now. Okay. Now
Right.
moving on to AEW. We got Jay Lethal, who we spoke about. A couple of these people obviously are no longer with the company, but they wrestled for the company, so they still get a shout out. We got Ricky Starks. We have the Acclaimed. We have Powerhouse Hobbs. Again, we have Mark Henry. He was a backstage coach. We got Kiera Hogan. We have Red Velvet. We got Keith Lee. Willow Nightingale. We have the brothers in the middle there. What are their names? Top Flight.
Yep, Top Flight.
Yeah. We got Lee Moriarty over there. We got Swerve. Shout out Jade Cargill. She's with WWE now. We got Athena. Shout out Keith Lee. We got AR Fox up there. We have Nyla Rose. We got Private Party up top. Yep, we got Athena. We got the referee over there to the left. Forgot his name, but shout out to you, sir. We got Sonny Kiss down there at the bottom. And then my man, Stokely Hathaway. Now, the only person that is not on this poster who absolutely, of course, without a doubt, deserves a shout out is the homie Prince Nana.
Oh, yeah, of course. Best manager in the business right now.
Man, it's amazing. It's amazing what they're doing. So who are some of your new favorites out of the AEW crop?
So just to bring them back around, I know we talked about them earlier, but I just do want to quickly shout them out. I do love what the Hurt Syndicate, MVP, Bobby, and Shelton are doing right now. I know 100%. They're brand new into AEW, but they're one of the first stables that I remember coming in somewhere and just kind of knocking it out the park right away. Obviously they had the equity of already being stable, so people already knew that. But I just love that it wasn't it didn't like dampen the return or anything like that because they came from somewhere else. You know what I mean? Right. Like people were still ready for it. So, and they're doing great things right now. They're the current AEW World Tag Team Champions. So yeah, shout out to them. Shout out to MVP for holding it down. As far as
shout out Cedric too. He just got released, but he's got a bright future
over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as some of my favorites, man, in AEW, I think it's great because a lot of the AEW black wrestlers, like a lot of them have put in some time on the indies and whatnot, but a lot of them are really young too. So a lot of them have some time to come up and really hone in their craft. So I love everything that Swerve Strickland is doing. I think he's probably one of AEW's big stars, top 5 at this point. And shout out to Keith Lee because I really rock with Keith Lee too. He got there with that Swerve Run Our Glory tag team that a lot of people forget about. I think a lot of people forget about how good
they were the tag champs.
Yeah, they were the tag champs. So I think Swerve has so much upside since he's been there, and I just think the ceiling is super high for him. I really love everything Athena is doing. It feels like, Athena had a lot of chances to kind of break out, but just never really had that lane to really showcase like who she really is and how she can really bring out that character along with the work. And she's one of the only reasons, and this is no shot at Ring of Honor at all, because we love our indies and everything like that, but she's one of the only reasons that company is being discussed right now on like a wide scale. When people talk about Ring of Honor, they're more than likely talking about Athena, and that's a testament to how hard she has worked to get herself over to that level. So when I think about 2 wrestlers right now that are just absolutely killing it right now, it's those 2. And then I think one guy who has a lot of upside to him, who I've always really just rocked with, is Lio Rush.
Mm-hmm.
I I think I think Leo Rush is really funny, and I think he's just one of those guys that um like with the style and everything, like with the high fly style, the flip style and everything. I just think that he's one of those dudes that can mix it really well with the technical aspect of it as well. And he's another guy that has a lot of time left on his hands because he's bounced around back and forth a little bit too. But it seems like every time he kind of moves to a new spot, it seems like he gets better and better and better. So I can't wait to see what he does in the future as well.
Yeah, shout out Leo Rush. Yeah, I agree. Definitely Swerve. Mercedes is killing it, obviously.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Queen Aminata has been really showing out, doing her thing. People love her.
Yeah.
And understandably so.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you know, the Acclaimed, you know, I love everything that they're doing. I love what Max Caster's doing right now with his character, like this delusional I'm the best wrestler alive thing, even though he keeps losing all his matches and stuff. Like I love what they're doing with him. That's hilarious.
Yep.
Who else, man? Who else is really doing their thing right now in AEW? I mean, like we shouted out the manager, you know, Stokely Hathaway, obviously. Willow, everybody loves Willow.
Yep.
You know, she's been doing phenomenal. So I mean, AEW, their black talent is really doing great.
A lot of future world champions on that list.
100%. Well, speaking of AEW, you know, we do the ring and the raps here. And on this week's The Ring and the Raps, we're going to focus on a guy who's at damn near all the AEW shows. And he also is one of the men who created the chorus and one of the more famous chants in AEW right now, "We Hurt People." And that man is Westside Gunn. So Westside Gunn, I love what he does because he's unapologetically a wrestling fan. He blends it into the music. A lot of the song titles are named after wrestlers or groups or finishing moves or, you know, different stuff like that. You know, he's always front and center. And like I said, he's done performances on AEW. He's got the Hurt Syndicate theme music right now with MVP dropping a verse and Smoke DZA. Back in the day, he did a joint called The Hurt Business with same group with also Wale. I love how much Westside is embraced in the wrestling world and how much he embraces the wrestling world as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we've seen, besides just him being at all the shows and the merch, the mentions in the music, all of that, we have seen other outside glimpses of showing how much he cares, whether it's been from the shows that he's had before WrestleMania. I always see him at Wale Mania, and Wale is another person. Because Steve shouted him out on the last time we talked about this.
Yeah, we're gonna cover Wale one day too.
Yeah. I feel like they kind of came up right around the same time, and were like, we got to figure this wrestling shit out and get it over to the masses. And I mean, especially like I said, Wale for sure, but especially Westside because of how far he's taken it. You know, he's started up his own promotion called Fourth Rope. He has championship belts already. They're having shows. So he's really showing that the dedication of how much he cares about wrestling is just as important to him as the label, the clothing lines that he's a part of, the music. You know, like he's showing that all of that is art to him, and he's showing that he's putting it all at the exact same level. I'm going to curate the best quality for the people. And, you know, so far, like he's doing it with the wrestling side, like putting your world title on a guy like Zilla Fatu, like, you know what you're talking about if you're doing stuff like that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love to see it, man. You know, and it's the whole Griselda too. They all clearly are wrestling fans. You know, Conway and Wes definitely more.
Right.
You know, they actually put out mixtapes called Hall of Nash. you know, so that lets you know right there.
Yeah.
You know, Benny seems like, you know, he watches, or, you know, he's at one time or another was a fan, or, you know, maybe more of a casual fan, but Conway and Westside, though, for sure, you know, they watch like we do, you know what I'm saying? Like they're at all, well, Westside is at all the events, him and Smoke DZA, but Conway raps about it a lot. You know, he has a lot of wrestling references in his raps and stuff. So,
I wouldn't be surprised if we went back on the footage one day for All In AEW 2018 and just happen to see a young Westside Gun in the crowd somewhere there.
Westside Gun was at their first show. He was at their very first show on pay-per-view. I watched it like a few weeks ago, and I was like, "Oh shit, Westside Gun was there." So yeah, he's been around.
He was probably early on, like everybody else was.
That's what I'm telling you. He was at the first show. That's what I'm telling you for a fact. He was at the first show.
I know what you mean. I'm just saying like before even AEW even got started. Because because All In was like that still happened like maybe a year or so before the very first.
You said All In. I'm thinking All Out.
I'm talking about All In. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he was there. But yeah, man, happy Black History Month, people. This has been Shoot Style Sessions once again with Shane G and Eric G. Make sure you follow the network. You can follow the @ right there below. If you're an artist yourself, you know, make sure to click on the link below. You can make yourself some money, and you know, pay for your own career. You know what I mean? The details are in that link below. Make sure you check it out, though. You know, shout out to Shock Your Pockets. And outside of that, man, Shoot Style Sessions. We will catch y'all next week. Steve will be back with us, and we'll give y'all another review, and we'll give y'all some predictions for Elimination Chamber. It's coming up. So we'll catch y'all. Appreciate everybody who's tuning in every week. And we love y'all, man. Shout out to the sickos. Peace.
Later, y'all.